friends. So today we're going to walk through where we're at with our kvass. And kvass, just as a quick reminder, is a sweet potato fermented beverage. So we, in the first episode, I showed you how I had used the food processor grater to just grate all my sweet potato. You want a couple of pounds worth. Then you're going to add some sugar, and you're going to leave that with some water to you dissolve it. A lot of people put spices in theirs. I didn't, because I know you can add them later, but if you happen to be not in a cinnamon mood for 3 months and all you have is kvass with cinnamon in it, then you have a bunch of kvass with cinnamon in it. And and you do have to refrigerate this stuff because it's fermented. It's going to keep kind of being alive for you. And so you can't just have it sitting, or, you know, if you don't live in Scandinavia or in a deeply cold place, you need to have it in your refrigerator taking up space. So just for practical purposes, I'm not going to make a bunch in a flavor, in a very specific flavor, because I know that for my body, I need to switch those flavors up, switch those nutrients up. So I'll show you where we're at. What I did was I got out some agave nectar for today, and then also have a sample of what I have found. So I have a bunch of kvass. This is kind of what it looks like right now. It's kind of a slightly pink, like not quite pink, not quite orange, not quite brown color. It's not super dark, but it has some color to it. It is opaque. You can't really see through it. And I'll show you one that I just opened. And has a little bit of fizzy to it, is here. This one I'm actually going to keep to use because I tasted it, and it's kind of at a good place for me to mix it with other things. So this is the one I'm going to be using. But this is an example of one of the jars that I just poured out into my growler. And you can see there's little fuzzies, little fizzies. You do want to, at this stage, when it's been sitting for a while, and any kind of raw sweet potato juice is going to do this. The starches are going to settle at the bottom. Now, just to give you another perspective, I think it was the very first video I ever saw on doing kvass said, once you grate all the sweet potatoes, you rinse them. I didn't rinse them at all. And mine does not taste starchy. But the reason I didn't is because, number one, it's a nutrient, right? Like the starch is the main game in the sweet potato, that in terms of fuel. So I didn't do that. It does not taste chalky like you might expect a raw starch to taste from a potato. There's nothing like palate, mouthfeel gross about it. And so I left it in, because rinsing it off, I'm pretty hesitant to rinse things off, especially when we're trying to get to probiotics, because the lack of probiotics in our bodies is really based on us having to rinse everything off all the time. The probiotics really sit in the soil. Problem is we've had such toxic soil for a long time, and toxic treatment on the plants, that then we have to start rinsing things. So I didn't do a rinse, but what I did find from that is you had a bunch of settling down here. It's even starting to settle again. And I do have a little bit more in the fridge. So I'm going to show you what that looks like. Please hold. Oops. Okay, so I'm going to show you different ways that I've been holding this. Now, mind you, I've been doing this during the winter storm, and so since I started it right before the storm, and then we went through the winter storm with it, and now it's like 70 degrees and really muggy and feels like I'm in Malariaville outside where I am. I can't have it outside now because it's fully fermented now, and you don't want it blowing up, and you don't want it getting more fermented than it is at this stage through that outside warm air. So this is an example of kind of how I've kept them. I am learning slowly to not fill jars this big. This is a 2-quart jar with liquids all the way up, because they're just too heavy to really maneuver and put through the funnel easily with one hand. It's just hard. But what I'm going to show you, this is the starch, okay? So it's just a little bit different color, right? And if I were to, I'm going to tighten this up. going to shake it a little bit. You can see that's kind of stuck on there. It's going to take a little bit of doing for me to get that off of there. Okay. Now you only want to do this. I know that mine's okay pressure wise because I've been working with several other jars that I did at the same time. But I should say before you start shaking, you want to tighten, as I did mention, but also check this pressure point. If it doesn't pop up for you and pop up and down, then your pressure may be too high to go around like shaking stuff up. Okay. So don't do it if that's the case. You may want to open it, either burp it or pour some of it out and then try again. Okay, but you do want to get, these are nutrients, right? Like we don't want to leave anything behind. That's the whole point in fermenting things, that we're not leaving behind stuff. This, just give it a rinse. It's completely fine. And frankly, if you're going to use it for a ferment specific jar, don't even rinse it, because anything that can live out in the open is just going to sit in there. You're not going to collect any mold. You're not going to collect any bacteria that are not positive bacteria because of the liquid that's in here. I do use these jars for other things, so I'm going to go ahead and give this a quick rinse. If you do want it clean, you want to rinse it right then. Doesn't take long, but you really want to do that because it's just kind of harder to do later. So here's what I've got. And then I've also got this growler. I finished this growler yesterday. I've been trying to get rid of it for a while because this was from when I was buying my kombucha. So it's a useful growler. I didn't rinse it because I was going to use it again for a ferment, right? So I just as soon have all the goodness in there. So I've put 2 containers in here. Although this holds 64 ounces, which is 2 quarts, you're never going to operate with this quite full, right? And the same thing is true of this. So I have 2 and a little of what I had of these in here at this point. I've got my funnel and it fills to about here. You can see it just barely. And what I'm going to do now, because again, I want a clean, kind of non-spiced version and then maybe a little bit of a spiced version too. I'm going to put some of this in here. I've got some room in there, and I won't fill this whole thing up with agave. That would be madness. But I am going to do some of it in here. And I'm going to eyeball it. I'm probably going to go from about here to about here. There's some writing right here. I'm going to go to the top of that writing line. Actually, this would be wiser. Okay. And this is heavy to do, but you want to try to hold the funnel up. Of course, ideally, we would get funnels that could hold themselves up. Oh, uh-oh. Oh, I did way too much. Oh, dear. Oh, this is very bad. Hang on. Hang on. We're having an emergency. I didn't know it was going in there. I thought it wasn't cooperating, but it was. Oh, crap. Okay, now it's coming all the way out. So this is a good example of how you accidentally waste your agave nectar, which is pricey, and your kvass, which you worked hard to make. But, you know, this is what happens in real life. So I'm going to show you what we're going to do. I made some oven things last night. Had to get those out. Okay, so I just got this in the sink. It's fine. Everything is okay over here. And what I'm going to do, I can see where the top is. Where the top is, I'm going to lose a little bit here. Okay, it just is what it is. We're just going to, we're just going to find something to like about it. How about that? As we used to say at one of my workplaces. Okay, so I didn't need to pour it into there right away, but I am going to pour a little bit of this off into here, okay? Because that's fine to do. And so now we're back under this line just by a little, but now we know we've had enough. Now we know we have the right amount, right? So I'm going to put that back in there. And I don't need to mix it super carefully But I do need to mix it up a little bit. Agave nectar is really awesome in that it doesn't seize up in, you know, your basic cold water like honey does, which is a nightmare. So that makes it way easier to mix with. And, you know, sometimes you really need the honey. Sometimes that's the nutrient you need, and so that's what's going to taste right. But in this case, we're okay with using the agave. So I've just cleaned off the top a little bit here. And let's seal this lid up real good. Be aware, any kind of plastic lid, because the viscosity and the mass actually changes, actually expands and contracts based on the amount of shaking you're doing, the amount of viscosity that you're presenting into the beverage. That's why stuff leaks when you've got a plastic lid on it, and it's stupid, right? So don't believe any lid when it tells you, if it's plastic, when it tells you that it doesn't leak. It's just not going to be true. Okay, let me move this over a little bit. We're going to give this some shaking, but I'm going to keep my hand on it. I'm going to do it over the sink, okay? Yeah, so it is wanting out a little bit. I'm not going to shake it a lot because, again, the agave is pretty good at being liquidy. I want to let out just that little bit of extra air. And because it's going to stay liquidy, it's going to be able to grab. The yeast in here is going to be able to grab that agave pretty well and eat it. I'm going to tighten this up pretty good. And although this won't stay the most fizzy ever, it will stay pretty fizzy. It'll stay fizzy enough to use. And this, you know, I've had this for, gosh, I bet 6 months. And I mean, mind you, it's not the only kombucha I've been drinking at all, but I've had this one for 6 months. And I just finished it last night. At the end, I sort of let it go to an alcoholized version because it's just a little fun. And, but the sugar goes down. You can tell because the sugar goes down and it tastes more like a dry, kind of more like a dry sparkling wine would be, but a little bit flatter because it is at the end of the bottle. So this is ready to put in the fridge, but it will not ferment if I do that. And so what I'm going to do is just leave it out. I will probably leave it out for about 3 days since it will be warm in here some of the time, cool in here some of the time. So that's that one. Okay. And then the next one. The next one we can infuse with some stuff, right? So this one I'm going to take and put into some smaller bottles. Actually, after I put the extra agave in here. And again, this agave step is really important for step 2. Just like if you were making kombucha, you may need some more. You're going to need some more sugar in fermentation number 2, because that's what's going to make the bubbles. It's going to have the yeast eating those, and then the bubbles are what happens after they eat them, because they are digesting. So I'm going to mix this up. I have in there about 1/3 of a cup based on my measurements here that you can't really see. I'm just going to mix this up pretty good. Give it a quick taste. Honestly, that tastes pretty good just like it is, but it's not fizzy yet, right? So I'm going to add some more so they have something to eat, but I can still have it taste that way. And basically what I'm saying to them then is I want you to eat 1/3 of a cup of the sugar and then leave 1/3 of the cup of the sugar in there for flavor. Dig? Okay. So that's that. I'm going to get some jars for us. And I know we've talked about before, I don't tend to use pint containers. And I don't for my kombucha because of the caffeine intake. I don't want to have that much caffeine going into me, but I want to keep the fizzies. And so I don't want to open something and then have it go flat. This one is different because there's no caffeine. This is just straight up sweet potato action. So what I'm going to do here is I've got one of my old Dr. Brew bottles, which are so cute. Not that it matters if the thing is cute or not. But see, this is exactly the problem with these kind of containers. Okay, so you're seeing me have this problem right now. And it's going to spill because there's no good way to do it. Because you have to hold the funnel up or else it will glug on you and get real messy. Okay. But in the process, you're going to make a mess, which is annoying. Okay, I'm going to do just a little bit more. Just a little bit more. You want it to be pretty crowded in there. I have mine crowded to about this point, which is a little high. I'm gonna take a little sip and take it down to here. You want to give it just a little bit of room, but not a lot of room. You don't want the carbon dioxide to be able to hang out in that penthouse of space there. Okay, that's tasting good already. I feel good about that, and I didn't necessarily think it was going to work out that well. I'm partly checking on this today, not even because I was curious about it at the beginning of the day, but because I do need some kind of probiotic that's not in a pill, that is not caffeine, right? Like I can't just be doing caffeine all the time. And I have to go back to work in a few days, and so I can't go around messing with my sleep schedule too much at this point. And more than messing with my sleep schedule, don't want to mess around with my adrenal system too much. So I'm just going to rinse these. Honestly, they taste good enough to drink right now, but we're not going to drink them right now. We're going to let them sit. Dr. Brew, definitely the cutest bottles. Okay. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with, like I have this bottle. It's got some old kombucha in it. I've left it by the dehydrator so it could kind of beef up some more. So you hear. I'm going to put some in here. See how fizzy that gets? It's craziness. All that is, you can't see it. There we go. Over doubled in size there. I'm going to put a little in there just because it's fun. Actually, let me do this first though. But don't pour the whole agave nectar jug in there, which is what I almost did. But you can see the problem with using these 2-quart jars. I just recommend not going down that road. They're good to store stuff in. I get it. But then you got to get a bunch of other stuff dirty because you got to transfer them into a smaller jar in order to be able to manage them when you're pouring. It's a whole situation, y'all. It's a whole situation. Okay, I'm going to put this in here because it'll be very jazzy. I do think this is also going to be a good mixer with like those real strong kombuchas that you make where you're just like, whoa, that one ended up really strong, but I don't want to make salad dressing out of it. I think this is going to be a good mixer for that. It's kind of smooth. It's got a nice flavor, but a flavor that can morph with you. Let me see how this is. Yeah, it doesn't really taste that different with the kombucha in it. This doesn't even need rinsing because I'm such a superstar. Okay, so we're putting these over. You don't need anything fancy, y'all, to do this stuff. You do need a little space. I'll I'll grant you that. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. Okay. Okay, there we go. So I'm just going to keep doing some of that with each one. I may add a little spice to some of them, but bear in mind some of the spices do better in that first fermentation process, or you have to activate them in a hot water. So, don't freak out if it doesn't like do a lot the first time. And things like ginger actually seem to roll better in fat a little bit. So, you may not get all the flavors that you want. The other thing I'll mention is I may add some of this. These are my pine needles that are fermenting. I may add those into some of this too. Adds a little bit of another note. So hope that helps. So basically it's ready, just like kombucha. It's ready to drink after the first fermentation. But the advantage of Kvass is if you have caffeine sensitivity, not an issue here. It's just straight sweet potatoes. And I did not use agave in the first ferment. I used, your basic EVAP sugar. But for the second ferment is not when you're trying to like create the critters. And so now that we don't need to create the critters, I think this will be fun. Okay. I'll see you next time. We'll do a different video about the pine needle Sprite.